if you know the design of a Porsche, you know the design of a Porsche. You know the lines of a Porsche. They've kept the lines, but it doesn't mean that they haven't improved on the engineering,
Big time.
right? So the lines of it, to your point, is that if you're being authentic as far as the shape of who you are and the shape of your character, but still working on the engine, working on the transmission, working on the interior, you can take a Porsche that's 30, 40 years old and put them next to each other, and you can see the similarities of the authenticity of it.
Big time.
And but at the same time, the engineering has gone to a whole nother level.
Right.
And there's no way that 30-year-old Porsche can even remotely compete with the brand new Porsche.
Big
And
time.
I think there's a huge lesson there that says uh, keep engineering yourself
Big time.
while keeping the body lines, but still adjusting them as they go. So, not a great point.
No, big time. um, Self-engineering, always working on ourselves. I think embracing a lot of what we view as what makes us authentic is important, because I think that will keep us from constantly being in question or uncertain about it. Because I think if we know what makes us authentic, we'll keep that body line, and we'll work on just engineering our mind and becoming better and more optimal as a person in the way we think. But if we're constantly grappling with acceptance and trusting that you know who you are, that knowing, then we'll always try to take different shapes or assume different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we assume another form, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah,
then we go
yeah.
back. And then we shoot a different form, it feels uncomfortable, then we go back. And then it's oftentimes what we go back to that really identifies like the mold. And if we can have a clear, conscious understanding of what that mold is, now we can just work on the inner engineerings without constantly adjusting and altering the external mold. So that's a big key about like
Yeah, man.
Porsche.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
What's your dream car? Actually, let me rephrase that question. What classic car would you own right now if you could have a classic car?
Mm.
I feel like that shows a little bit of personality sometimes. Like old Lincoln Continental with the suicide doors,
Mm-hmm.
or a muscle car, or like a big old Cadillac Brougham, or just
Mm-hmm.
like, what would be your vibe? Classic car doesn't necessarily have to be perfect condition, resto mod, whatever. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I would either have an old muscle car, and I would probably go with like the Shelby GT 1979,
No
around
doubt.
that age. That Gone in 60 Seconds, Eleanor.
Yep.
Beautiful car.
Yep.
I love that muscle boxy vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Even I like the old Camaro style.
Yep. Yep.
Big nose,
Yep.
growl. Or I would go like old school Jaguar.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
With the hood that pops up the other way, like the XJS, like the long
The
nose two
long
seater.
nose,
Yeah,
like
yeah, I
right
know
when
you're
they
talking about.
started rounding the body.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
had the
yeah.
long nose with the four eyes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they first started making them in the drop top.
Yep.
And it was kind of smooth.
Got it. Yeah, yeah.
What about you?
There's a few different ones. That muscle car era.
Yep.
70 Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 70 Mustang Boss 302.
Yep.
With that body to it, big back. Almost looks like it's moving without it, without it moving. I'll probably do something like that. I've always loved the Lincoln Continental.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide doors, 63, 64, long, 17-foot long car,
Mm-hmm.
convertible. The TV show Entourage, in the beginning, they had the Entourage shot, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that longness to it. I like boxy too.
Yep.
So I kind of like that a little more of a boxy vibe. And then a little bit newer, Bentley, the Bentley Continental, before they made it round. To your point,
Mm-hmm.
I think Bentley went off cue when they came out with the Continental GT. So any car lovers out there, in 2001 or 2002, Bentley always had these very specific lines,
Right.
very specific lines. For years, there was a line with Rolls-Royce. 2001 or 2002, they came out with this bubble of the Continental GT,
Mm,
and I just think they completely ruined the authenticity of the lines of the body.
mm.
And at that point, to me, you could see that car and it looked like an Ultima coupe, right? When the Nissan Ultima had a two door for a couple of years.
You ain't
You know what I mean?
lying.
It looks a little bit like that. Like
Yeah.
they lost the authenticity. Now they've gone back and they've changed some of the lines a little bit, but to me, early 2000s Bentley Continental, they had this removable top,
Hmm.
this like removable part of the roof,
Right.
which was unheard of. To not only, it's not a sunroof, you actually remove a portion, almost like a target top on a Porsche.
I like that. Like the T top, Corvette T
Unbelievable.
top.
Oh,
We take the little
unbelievable.
panel out.
And it was the whole panel from driver to
Shit.
passenger. This panel that goes across the top, incredible, incredible.
I'm trying to think of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Bentley GT.
Hmm.
I know the bubble one that you're talking about.
Yeah.
What is interesting about a lot of the car manufacturers, they'll always kind of go back to those old foundational early styles to draw inspiration for some of the newer ones.
Yep.
And they might take risks and pivot and go come out with a few model years with the different
Completely.
design, but then slowly but surely you'll see them
Yeah. Let
going
me
back
see.
in time a little bit.
I mean, and even Mustang did it, right? Camaro did it, where they wanted to bring in some of those old. I had one here. Anyway, I'll show it to you before we head out. But I know you probably had some stuff you wanted to.
No, no, I was just jotting some stuff down. Um, what would be like three keys of wisdom that you think you've obtained over the years as far as authenticity in your own personal life and your own
Mm,
experiences? What do you think are some things that you could take away from, say, the past decade,
mm,
just about being unfiltered in what you really, 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 truly enjoy about yourself?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So whenever I think authenticity, I'm always thinking improving on
Yeah.
characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love the word characteristics of molding
Right.
your character through the years. And I think there's a lot of things that you can decide when it comes to authenticity that are from early on. I think part of authenticity to anyone
Mm-hmm.
is the culture they grew up in and the culture that
Big time.
they gravitate towards. Right. Now,
Mm-hmm.
being someone that grew up in New York, there's a New York City culture, there's a Hispanic culture,
Right.
right? There's all of these different cultures. And I think part of that, there's a lot of authenticity behind the culture
Mm-hmm.
that the person can decide to associate with and that can decide to embrace,
Yep.
right? Because there are parts of the New York City culture that I choose not to embrace.
Right.
There could be parts of the Hispanic culture, it could be all these different cultures. Even there's a culture within fandom,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some people might look at fans and say, fans from this specific city behave this certain way
Right.
because it's a part of the culture. And then they all want to say it's okay. That's how this type of fan acts.
Right.
It's part of the culture. Well, you know what? I choose not to adopt that part of the culture. So I think one of the biggest keys is the cultures that you were exposed to at a young age craft your perception of authenticity. And when you're able to see what those cultural cues are, then you end up adopting them only because humans by nature are programmable
Mm-hmm.
based on their environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're going to get programmed based on the cultures that they're around. The culture of the Midwest versus the culture of New York City
Mm-hmm.
versus the culture of London versus the culture of Texas versus the culture of LA,
Yep.
right? And there are parts of the culture that a person can choose to embrace or choose to say that's not part of it. You go out to LA and San Diego, different
Mm-hmm.
energy, kind of people are, or if you go down to the islands, it's island time.
Right.
Everybody's on island time. Oh, it's island time. Don't worry. Drives me insane. Drives me insane. And I think that there's a lot of, I think that there can be a lot of harm that comes from certain cues in culture that people don't realize. And then they pick it up based on culture. They embrace the culture as a whole, but they're not realizing that there's a couple cues inside of that big bubble of culture that might not be beneficial to what it is you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone wants to say, well, it's island culture, it's island time culture, got it. Fully understand what you're
Right.
saying. I understand that you embrace that entire bucket.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. At the same time, are there some behaviors that are defined in island time that may not be favorable in what it is you're trying to do?
Right.
Now, equally as harsh is New York City culture,
Right.
right? So sometimes people that I know, I grew up in New York City, and there's a lot of people that I know. If you go to another culture and you're bringing that same bucket of New York City,
Yep.
are you that might not be
Yeah.
exactly what you but by you embracing that part of the culture, it could be counterproductive to what it is you want to do when you're outside of that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be able to identify that. So if you're going at this intense pace, because New York City is a very intense pace, and you move to San Diego, it ends up being a hindrance versus being an attribute based on the culture that you're in. So now you put yourself in an environment where it's actually a hindrance to what it is you want to do based on who it is that you have to have around you in order to accomplish what it is that you want to do. So you got to observe that. Now, how do you still embrace the authenticity of being raised in a certain culture, but realizing that there's authenticity and there's characteristics, and
Mm-hmm.
characteristics can be molded, right? And behaviors can be molded
Big time.
into characteristics. So if you can adjust your behaviors, but if there are some behaviors that are a part of a culture and you're just embracing them because it's a part of the culture, then don't get upset if it turns out that you're then also getting the product of what it means to be a part of that culture,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother ball game. And I think a person has to be able to take a step to the side and identify. So back to your question, it's sort of the authenticity of it. How do you identify your authenticity? I think the first is to really observe what are some of the cultural characteristics you've picked up through the years, and why did you pick them up?
Mm-hmm.
And then which ones do you identify with the most that you believe are authentic to who you are? The languages you speak, the accent you have, maybe the way you do your hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's part of a culture, maybe the way you walk, you talk.
Yep.
At the same time, being able to identify those and realize what are the lines of the Porsche that you want to maintain,
Mm-hmm.
and then how can you go inside and still adjust the engineering of the car to make the car better, right? To your point, when you brought up the Porsche, the idea,
Yep.
those lines are there. The lines of a Porsche, everyone knows the lines of the Porsche. That's
Yep.
the authenticity of it. But you got to keep working on the engine and the motor. So I think it's really about identifying cultural cues, identifying what you want to use and embrace. At the same time, what don't you want, and throw it away. Change who you are. Throw away the characteristics you don't want. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's a lot of people out there that hide behind the word authenticity when it's based on how they were programmed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot that's there. At the same time, you can look at the mirror and say, you know what? I'm deprogramming this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to walk around on island time, because in order for me to get to where I need to go, I need to have more of a sense of urgency. And at the same time, if a person has an overly aggressive sense of urgency, they need to understand that in order, now the track that they're on, they can't drive the way they did over
For
there.
sure.
Right. I don't know about you, but if you go down to even downtown Dallas or a metropolitan area, isn't it interesting how the driving changes?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's a lot more careless.
It's a lot more careless. What a coincidence. And on top of that, have you ever noticed that people that have worse cars drive worse? What a coincidence.
Big time.
Right? Because in their minds, you know what? They already have a couple dings. They already have a couple scratches. They
Right.
already have high mileage.
Right.
So they don't care whether or not they scratch your car, they ding your car, because to them, they already have that. Life is exactly the same. There's people out there with scratches in their lives, dings in their lives. So they don't mind if they come and ding you a little bit. It's just like driving.
Right.
And when you go to certain areas with a lot of dinged up cars, what ends up happening? You could show up in a beautiful car, and then these weird things starts happening. People start driving different around you because you're in a nice car. Well, that's odd. Why would they do that? Just because I keep my car nice is going to make you drive more aggressively around me? That's interesting. So maybe the exact same thing happens when
Yeah.
you show up in that light, when you show up in a nice car,
Mm-hmm.
and you find out that even though you're in a nice car, there are people that treat you maybe a little better because of the car you pulled up in. At the same time, wow, this is interesting. There's people that are treating me worse
Yeah.
because of the car I pulled up in. That's interesting. There's people that want to scratch my car because they don't have it. That's interesting, right? So that's the reality of human nature, is
Yeah.
that love and hate are not on opposite spectrums. Love and hate are not opposites. I'd argue that love, the opposite of love, is really, envy,
Mm. That's a
right?
good point.
And the middle is indifferent. I think if someone falls out of love, they don't fall into hate. They don't fall into envy. They don't fall into jealousy. I think they fall into indifference. I'd be more worried if someone were to say to me, and they have an opinion. I said, look, I I'm good. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm completely indifferent to it. And when you really put that emotion and you attach that emotion or that lack of emotion
Mm-hmm.
to things, I think that can be fuel for you to get down the road. It's like, okay, cool. You don't like my car, no problem. But but now the other thing too, part of that metaphor is that then means you need to be a better driver, and you need to be a shrewd driver. You need
Mm-hmm.
to be an aggressive driver at times when you're around aggressive drivers. We can't just go through life. No, we got to drive slow. We need to do that. No, if you're in an area that everybody's driving crazy and hectic, is it better for you to know how to drive crazy and drive aggressive and drive hectic? Is it better to know how to do that,
Mm-hmm.
or to only know how to cruise in the back hills? Both, they're both necessary. And I think there's an interesting metaphor there of like, no, learn how to drive hard, aggressive. Because when you're in those environments, you need to be able to maneuver out of it when someone's about to barrel into you. If not, then you're just cruising through life, and then people banging into you and rear ending you all day, and then you just feel that it's their fault for being bad drivers. But then you look at their cars and be like, well, they got a bunch of other accidents in their cars anyway. So is it really their fault for banging into me? Or do I just need to be able to be a better driver to identify them 50 feet away and be like, I see you. I see you coming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to change lanes before you even get here.
Yeah.
And that's a good driver. That's a good driver. Someone that can see in their rearview mirror somebody speeding. Someone that can see 3 cars ahead, brake lights going on. That makes a good driver. And the exact same is with life.
I agree. I agree. Um, there is something that's said. I don't know if it's philosophy or a statement, but it's saying, how do you want to be received? And there's a carelessness, I think, with a lot of us where we try to use almost as a mental signal so that we don't feel anything less than about where we're at in life, whether we're developed or underdeveloped. We say, well, I don't care. I don't care what people think about this. But I think the harsh reality is we do care. We do care how we show up. We do care how we're received. And so a good question that you could prompt yourself is, how do I want to be received? How do I want to be represented? When I meet someone and I walk away, how do I want to try my best to to give off a brand image or a feeling or associate a perception? And can't control everything, because people are going to think what they want to think based on their cultural background, upbringing, and whatever their preconceived notions are, stereotypes. But if you can feel comfortable representing who you want to be, how you want to be for you, and we adopt more of a I care, right? So who cares what they think? It ain't about them. How do you feel? If you want to go to the grocery store in pajamas, how do you feel about that? How do you want to be represented? If other people see you in that, do you want to be represented as somebody who's careless? And if it's a big thing of your comfort is more important to you, then stand firm on that. But if you're not proud of the mental state that you're in, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's being represented in the way that you carry yourself, we got a different direction and a different focus
Right.
that we need to attack first.
Right.
Other than saying everybody has to accept where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
because this is where I'm at. It might be something prompting in there like, where do you want to be at though? Is that truly who you are? And if that is truly who you are, then you should have a peace in your life. And so I think that the biggest thing is a biggest signal to, if we're in a positive, authentic vibration, right, way of being, is, are you at peace? Because as people, we're here today, going tomorrow. And if something happens right now, right, we only have a snapshot of what we lived, not where we're going. So are you at peace right now with where you're at in life? And if you're at peace with who you are, then keep showing up that way.
Mm-hmm.
Then how you're perceived and how people take you and how you feel about you subconsciously really doesn't matter, because you're at peace, you're comfortable with that, you're okay with that. But you're going to live and have a greater life experience, period, if you're at peace. But I'm willing to bet that most people are not. A lot of times, those people who are showing up less than what they want to show up as,
Mm-hmm.
they're not happy about it. They're not truly at peace. They're not
Right.
comfortable with who they are.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a little bit of tumultuousness in their life that they're
Right.
trying to overcome,
Yep.
but maybe aren't in a position to overcome currently. And so now it's just like, well, I'm going to just show up. Forget it. You get to a point to where you're tired of fighting
Mm-hmm.
that spiritual tug of war.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I'm not fighting no more. And then you try to put it on others. I'm not going to fight myself for others because I feel that others are making me feel bad. And it's like, no, honestly, you have that moment in the mirror, you're making yourself feel bad, right? And you're not at peace. So if you're not at peace, then that's a signal that we have to then make changes to who we are authentically, because something in you is not settling your spirit about who you are and how you're showing up in life. You might need to get developed. You might need to start to show up a little bit differently internally first,
Mm-hmm.
fix some things internally first, and then you'll start to show up differently externally.
Yeah, makes sense.
But
No, for sure.
to that point, you know what I mean, until that happens, you don't mind if your car is dirty. You don't mind if you're driving crazy. You don't mind, because it's a reflection of where your mind is at. Right? As soon as you're prompted with something of value, let's say external value, if I give you the keys to a Maserati, to a Ferrari, to a Lamborghini right now, that same person that's driving their vehicle crazy might drive a little bit differently, because it's a perceived value. It's like, no, wait a minute, this is different. I can't ding this up.
Oh yeah, it's like driving a rental car versus driving your own car.
Yeah, let me watch out for
a lot of people that
potholes.
drive rental cars hard.
They don't care.
Because they don't care.
They don't care about it.
Sure.
So the first thing I think is self-care. We have to care about ourselves first. And I think that's missing across the board. And I'm not one to sit here and say build a high horse or anything. I work on that too. Self-care. How can I learn to really appreciate who I am? Because if I appreciate and value myself of who I am, I'm going to show up differently. I'm going to talk differently. I'm going to walk differently, because now I see value in who I am. And so I'm going to present value to others. I'm not just going to be so careless with others, because I'm not careless with myself. You know what I mean? I'm going to show up as how I feel. And a lot of times, I think that's what we neglect to appreciate or to accept, is that we're showing up how we feel regardless, whether we want to be in denial or not. We're showing up how we feel. If you get in your car and it's trashed and you're looking around, that's a reflection of where your mind is at. That's a reflection of how you feel it. We can accept it or we can deny it, but we are showing up regardless of how we feel. And so the first thing is, if you're not showing up in a way in which you respect, you appreciate, starts with you first, that's a signal that you need to make changes, not for others. It doesn't have to be about everybody else's opinion about you. It starts with our opinion about ourselves. And I think that's the true authenticity. If there's things you love and respect about you, start there, stay there, keep those things, magnify those things, but don't be so in your own way to where you're willing to defend things that you don't like, you don't respect, that are holding you back, just for the sake of, well, it's me and take it or leave it.
Right.
It's like, no, you leave it, right? You show up differently for you, but
right.
Yeah, that prompted a good point.
Well, there's a lot of reflection in that, right? So it's about reflecting and being able to see what are the characteristics that you like about yourself and what are the ones that you don't, and being realistic about it. Now, the other thing I'd argue is that regardless, if you do have a vehicle, you do have a car, learn to drive it the best you can.
Facts.
And what I've found is that when a person goes to a dealership, if they're upgrading, look at the car that they're trading in. And that's a pretty good example of what that next car is going to go through.
Yeah.
Right? So does it become the chicken or the egg conversation of like, I'll be a better driver when I have a better car, versus I'll be a better driver now and that will get me to the better car. If you're driving crazy now, you might not even get to the destination where the next car is.
Big
right?
time.
So sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, and like you were saying, well, sometimes when people drive better cars, they want to drive better. Agreed, I agree with that 1,000%. But then the question is how many people are not even getting to that next car because of the way they're driving the current car?
That's a good point.
And I think that if, I'd argue and say, like, okay, well, drive the car you have now better than you wouldn't, right? Because if you see somebody pull into a car lot, they pull in, ton of mileage, dings all, dirty
Mm-hmm.
car. What are the chances that that next car is going to go through that same beating? What are the chances that they built the habits of a dirty car? You get in somebody's car, you're like, man, this car is filthy.
Right.
Is that the same way that you treat your body? I'm just curious because
Big
that
time.
could be the same metaphor.
Right.
If a person's only going to start working out when they have the six pack, it's like it kind of reversed there.
Right. Right.
You're
Right.
not going to get it unless you're treating your body this way now
For sure.
to be able to get that better car,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I think there's some people that, well, if I had a six pack, I would eat right.
I would act different.
Right.
Right.
If I had that car, I would drive different.
Right.
If I had that body, I would eat different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it's like, oh, well, you want to protect that asset.
Right.
I agree. But in order to get that asset and earn the asset and know that the universe thinks that you can handle that asset,
Right.
take care of the asset you have, or else you won't get access to that asset.
Yeah.
In theory, right?
For
But
sure.
I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I think there's a lot of people that do take that perspective of I'll be a better driver when, I'll eat better when, versus like, all right, how do I stay in the air of gratitude and being grateful and be like, listen, yeah, I wake up every day and be like, hey, I got another day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got
For
another
real.
day. So how do I drive this day the best I can
Mm-hmm.
with the foot on the gas,
Yeah.
with the emergency breakdown to get to where I'm not intentionally driving anyone off the road, not intentionally crashing into anyone, but just saying, I'm going this way. If the way that I'm driving is somehow offending you, even though it has nothing to do with the way you're driving,
Right.
has nothing to do with the lane that I'm in compared to the lane you're in. Have you driven with somebody and they're driving along and they got something to say about everybody,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
They're driving along and it's like, oh, well, look at this guy.
Yeah,
Like,
right,
why is this
right.
guy driving so slow? And why is that guy driving? And I don't understand. And like, focus on your driving. What does it have to do? And you
Yeah.
know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. And then on top of that, if you're driving, they want to be in the passenger seat. And every time you go to change lanes, they're looking in the mirror for you,
And you can't
right
even
or
see out the
wrong.
mirror.
And then you can't see out the mirror, or they're like, are you sure you want to make that left? And you're like, right?
Yeah.
They're questioning your driving abilities, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, are you really getting to where you want to go?
Yeah.
They're looking at the speedometer, like not saying anything,
Mm-hmm.
but looking at the speedometer, right? And all the people that drive and they're oh, well, look at this guy's car, and can you believe that? And who would do this and who would do that? Same thing. I'm just here driving. I'm staying in my lane. You stay in your lane. If I need to go around you, I'll go around you.
Big time.
If I need to stay behind you, I'll stay behind you. But I think some of us get caught up in and not first of all not identifying where we want to go,
Mm-hmm.
not working on our car, right? The only way we're going to get that self development, right? The best product you can invest in is yourself, your car, right? If you want to go a certain place and you have a 2-cylinder engine, you're not getting up a mountain. It's just not going to happen.
No.
It doesn't matter how hard you push it. It doesn't matter how much gas you put in. You don't have the horsepower. You just don't, right? But you got to keep building your vehicle so that when the mountain comes, you can get up the mountain. You can't wait to get up the mountain to get that vehicle because you'll just never get up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's self-development that some people kind of shit on. But no, at the end of the day, if you're not continuously upgrading your vehicle, you're not going to get up the mountain you want to get up. Mm-hmm. It is physically impossible to get up, a mountain with a 2-cylinder car.
It really is. And I don't think it's enough focus on self-development or self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the people we admire, higher achievers, they generally always have a strong habit of constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly building and making intentional time and effort and pouring into themselves because you have to, because that immediately increases your capacity. That was a great analogy about the 2-cylinder trying to get up a mountain. You got to upgrade. You're not going to get up there without enough horsepower. you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so that immediately says, if that's where I want to go, but I'm here, and the vehicle that I'm currently in, that might be ourselves, our vessel, is not equipped to get there. It's not to say stop. It's not to say, well, this is me. It is what it is. It's like, no, one thing as humans that makes us special over all other creatures on this earth is we can evolve mentally. We can create a different lifestyle for ourselves. A
Mm-hmm.
lion's a lion's a lion's a lion. A tiger's a tiger's a tiger. That's what they are. They have
Mm-hmm.
instincts, they have abilities, and they have a focus. And it's the same focus. They're going to be a lion, period. But we don't have to be exactly who we are in this current state. We have the ability to pour into ourselves and develop and almost recreate ourselves to the point that you made earlier,
Completely.
right? To say, okay, even if I change the target to say, hey, what I wanted is at that mountaintop, but I really want the one that's over there. But if I can't get on this one, I know I can't get over there, so I might as well not even try. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, man, we have the ability to do it, to
Yeah.
create it, but are you willing to put forth the effort that it's going to take to turn you from a 2-cylinder to an 8-cylinder so that you can get up there? And that's going to be a long process. But a lot of times we just try to figure out, okay, well, how can I just the result? We took so much focus and time on the result, on, okay, well, how can I throw a rock to hit it to make it fall? Or how can I, is there a back road? It's like all that time that you're taking into trying to force this result without going through the process and the journey,
Mm-hmm.
that's time that you could be taking towards upgrading that engine,
Mm-hmm.
towards developing yourself. But it's just having that clear concept of patience. We're in a I want it now mode because we see people who have it now. So like,
Mm-hmm.
if they got it now, why can't I have it now? Well, they might have started with 6 cylinders. You never know.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They may have used their time differently over the past. They might have found that rock to, you never know, but
Yep.
that's their journey, that's their life. We have to embrace where we are, what we are, and that's a harsh reality because nobody wants to say, I'm not equipped for what I want. Nobody wants to say that. But without first saying that, we're not going to prompt ourselves with the inspiration to make change. We constantly make the excuse of like, no, I deserve it. How so? Right? Are you
Yep.
sure you deserve it yet?
Completely.
That yet? You may deserve it once you put the work in to earn it. But are you sure you deserve it yet? Just because that person has it. You don't know what that person been through. You don't know what who before them been through to put them in the position to have it now.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And you might have to then go through those paces. But now it's just turning that focus back here. And it's crazy. I've listened to a lot of inspirational leaders say the same thing. If you want to upgrade your life, you have to first upgrade yourself. And at first, when I heard that, I was just like, that's so vast. Like, what do you mean? But literally, improving yourself as a person, improving your knowledge, improving your critical thinking skills, improving your ability to problem solve, improving your ability to see things more positively,
Yep.
immediately now, for whatever reason, adds more horses, adds an extra cylinder. And it's crazy how the more and more you pour just directly into yourself and the way how to speak better, how to communicate better, how to think more critically, how to create, right? Figure it out. And there's so many resources. The more we leverage those resources to learn. Now all of a sudden we're a little bit stronger. And now all of a sudden that confidence that was missing to take that next step, you have it because you're like, oh, I got this. I know I can get there. I got 4 cylinders now. I know I can at least get half the mountain with these 4 cylinders. So get to the half to the mountain. And then once you get half to the mountain, keep working on yourself to get the other 2 cylinders, to get 6, and get up a little higher. And once you get a little higher, keep working on yourself to get. And then the next step will present itself once we take that next step. But taking that first step is scary because it comes with so much self accountability that it's very challenging to do.
Yeah.
Is to say, hey, I am not quite ready yet. I need to go get ready. But damn, without saying you're not ready, you won't get ready. You
Right.
keep ignoring it.
Yeah. And part of that is that even the word ready can be too big sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. Because if we're ever thinking about getting ready for something,
Yep.
the answer is always no, right? And well, I shouldn't say always no, but a lot of times the answer could be no. You look into this big mountain, and you're like, well, are you ready to climb this big mountain? You're like, well, not the big mountain, but are you ready to at least get up the first couple steps? And that answer has to be yes. And then there's an interesting phrase, I mean, that's been used thousands of times, which is ready, fire, aim,
Mm-hmm.
which is just get ready to a certain point,
Yep.
right? Going to the
Yeah.
gym, right? Get ready, put your gym clothes on, right? That's getting ready. That's enough.
Yep.
But if you spend too much time finding 100 workout plans, 100 diet plans, mentors without actually getting into the gym and getting sweaty, now you're over preparing.
Mm-hmm.
Now your ready portion of that is just it's just way too big. Ready, fire, aim. Just get ready enough, put your gym clothes
Mm-hmm.
on, stretch, fire, do a couple of moves, ask for help, get some changes going. So ready, fire, aim. So the same exact metaphor as we're talking about cars and cylinders and horsepower and being able to get up the mountain, the exact same metaphor is from fitness. You don't have the muscle to push 3 plates right now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the muscle to be at the top of that mountain. Now, because of the attention that's given to a lot of people that have reached a certain height on mountains,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easily accessible
Mm-hmm.
for us to ingest, it makes us look at that and not realize the path of the mountain. Or if it doesn't at least make them realize the path of the mountain, it makes them think that the path up to the top of the mountain was easier than anyone would perceive.
Right.
Anyone would perceive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd argue that anyone that has achieved something at a ridiculously high level, whether it be athletics, whether
Yep.
it be in business, I can almost with absolute certainty say it was probably harder than most people would even think,
Big time.
right?
Big time.
And if you because there's so much behind it that people don't see, but they can look up to the top of the mountain, see the 8 pack, see the muscle, see the vehicle that got up there,
Yeah.
and then say, well, I can get up this mountain. But then there becomes a metaphor of like, oh, absolutely. If you continually add horsepower, you continually add different things to your toolbox, to what you're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of a sudden you're going up that mountain, and guess what happens? What happens when you get a little bit higher? It starts to snow. It's colder,
Yeah.
right? There's icy roads.
You gotta be
But
ready.
you didn't have to learn how to drive on icy roads at the bottom in the valley. In the
Yeah.
valley, you didn't need to be on icy roads. You could just drive smooth and everything was fine in the valley. Now you go up the mountain and it's icy. It's icy, but do you have the vehicle you need to be able to handle the icy roads?
Mm.
I don't know. But there's a lot of people that'll slip and slide up there and never really make it to the pinnacle because they weren't even considering they needed all-weather tires. They weren't even considering that they needed four-wheel drive. They weren't even considering they needed snow chains on their tires. They weren't even considering it
Yeah.
because they needed none of that at the bottom of the mountain. They needed none of that in the valley. They didn't even need heat because in
Yeah.
the valley it was warm. They let the top down, but a convertible top in a cold climate, it's not a good look.
No.
It's not a good look because they don't have that seal that you need, right? So now all of a sudden you got to look at it from a vehicle perspective and say, okay, I need to think about the capabilities of my vehicle that I'll need one day and continuously, slowly. And when everybody's looking at you and you're in the valley, you're just getting out of the valley, you get heading up your first hill, and everyone's like, why are you buying snow tires? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, you don't know where I'm going.
You don't know where I'm going.
You don't know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where I'm going. Like, oh, okay,
Okay.
sure. Well, that's a waste of money.
Right.
That's weighing you down right now. That's keeping you from being and enjoying the valley more
Right.
because now you're heavier because you're carrying around snow tires. All right, you don't know where I'm going,
Big time.
so no problem. You stay here, and all of a sudden, I'm trading in that convertible, and now I'm all right. What vehicle do I need for the next journey? Right? And then you keep trading the vehicles in. Well, now I need this. Now I need this vehicle. That vehicle is going to get me to that level. And then how am I making the investments? It's also being able to handle that vehicle so that when I get to the top of the mountain, I not only have the vehicle that's necessary to get through that climate, at the same time, I have the skill to navigate the vehicle.
Big
Because
time.
you can give someone an F1 car and they can know how to drive. You think they're getting around a track? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They won't even get around. And if they're gonna do it, absolutely not.
Hell no.
So it's the exact same metaphor. Everyone thinks that they know that they're good drivers, but the conditions that they're driving in are pretty easy, pretty comfortable,
Mhm.
but they can't drive at the highest level.
That's a hell of a point. I mean, it's something to be said about taking the current vehicle where it is and trying to force it to make it to the destination without making the appropriate changes. And to your point about like you may you may get some headway, you may get on down the road, but are you going to be able to continue? Are you going to be able to handle the the ebbs and flows that comes with the journey if you're not willing to make the adjustments? And so at some point in time, you have to make the adjustments, and that's
Hmm.
a lot of times the reality of achievement. We 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, because we're trying to take the current vessel, the current vehicle, force it down the road to the destination when we know what's necessary. If you know you're climbing a mountaintop, you know you need something powerful. You know you need something strong. You know you need something sturdy. You know you need something stable. But if you're not strong, powerful, stable, confident in your mind right now, and you're trying to force yourself down this journey, hey, the lion, tigers, and bears might take you out
Hmm.
if you don't spend time to get into the shooting range, if you don't spend time to learn the force and learn how to survive in case something happens, if you don't have your, you know what I mean, that duffel in the back that has everything you need,
Yep.
rations, right, to survive. When there's an avalanche, when there's a snowstorm, when there's setbacks, when there's pitfalls, when life happens, are you mentally going to be able to withstand and persist? Or is that going to make you pull over? Is that going to make you throttle down? Is that going to take your vehicle out? And then we find ourselves on a 10-year journey. And we're like, damn, man, it's taking a long time to get right here. And people are there. It's like you never know what they started at. You gotta be willing to accept that. If you started in a little bitty Prius boy, you trying to make it up a mountain, everything's not fair. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing to embrace is some
Hmm.
like life is not fair. It's not meant to be fair. It
Yep.
is what it is. It's on us to adjust accordingly to what we want.
Yep.
And that's a very powerful thing mentally to understand. Like we still are in control. It's what we want. It's like, what do you want? As humans, you can go get it within a certain regard to
Hmm.
certain respects, but it's a scale, and we have to be willing to accept where we are on that scale and not get lost in comparison to say, I deserve this because somebody has it or because it's available to get. It's like, yeah, but those who obtain it, they're going to obtain it at the rate or the level in which they are on the scale. And if you happen to be in certain circumstances, if you happen to be in a certain position in life to where you're a little bit further back on the scale, let's not say, well, that's not fair. Let's say this is what is. Now, how can I figure out how to upgrade and how to get myself? I need that vehicle. I need to slowly but surely become closer to the person, to the position, to where then I can reach out and get what I want. But it starts with that development and it starts with that preparation.
Yep.
Sometimes 2 years of preparation for continuous progression forward might get you to the destination in 5 years. But sometimes without that 2 years of preparation, you're going to have this inconsistent progression that's going to turn that 5 years into 10. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so it's just understand, oh, that's what I want. That's what's required. This is where I'm at. These are the things that I'm going to need to get there. I mean, not get lost in comparison and it's not fair because that's going to make me want to take a shortcut.
Hmm.
Let me just do what I got to do so that I can start moving forward, period. But that's a big key. You
Yeah. You hit
got to
the
make
nail right on the head.
changes.
Where it's being do you have the skills and do you have the skill? I mean, look, skills. Do you have the skills
Yeah.
for what is necessary to come? I think that's what it comes down to be able to handle what is on that path, is on that journey. And the interesting metaphor you use right now is like if you got a little Prius and all of a sudden you're trying to get up that mountain, but there's no charging stations up that mountain. So there comes a time where you probably got to get a different vehicle, right? And metaphorically speaking. So if you're going to go different places, what vehicle do you need? What are the chances?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that could happen while going up this mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a spare tire?
Right.
Do you know how to change a tire? Something as simple as that, as it sounds, is the metaphor of life, right? Not that all of us need to be surgeons or but at the same time, do you know how to apply a tourniquet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something basic. And all of those are going to be skills and capabilities that make a man prepared for what could happen on the journey. And putting one foot in front of the other, ready, ready, fire, aim. Get as ready as you can get within a certain time limit. And you know what? Fire the gun, aim after. Where did I hit on the target? I need to make an adjustment. Then there's a lot of people that are over preparing for the ready and under preparing on the fire part, or I should say, they're over preparing on the ready, but then they're not firing enough. They're not firing enough. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
look, just fire, fire. You know what? If you're completely off target with something, at least you see how off target you are. Then you can make an adjustment. Be like, well, I keep hitting the ground. I keep aiming high. Now you can make an adjustment. If you're just sitting in there sighting your gun in the entire time, you're never really going to know how close you're going to be to the target and how much time are you wasting versus if you, all right, let me set up, ready, set, boom. All right, I'm a little to the left. All right, let me shoot again to the right. Now, in that same amount of time that this other guy's still getting ready, yeah, you shot 3 or 4 times, but now you're at least on target and he's still getting ready. So, uh, observe those areas in your life where you're over preparing to be ready and realizing there's preparing and there's over preparing, but there's, if the over preparation is keeping you from taking action, then that's when that's where the line of over preparation is, of you figuring out that it's keeping you from taking action and being able to say, how ready am I? Ready enough? And even when you think you're not ready enough, do it anyway.
I think that's even a lesson in itself. That's a great point,
Yep.
because I think that some of us we have um, natural areas in life that we're confident,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think you have different personality types, and you have different people who aren't afraid to shoot. They're not afraid to pull the trigger. And we call them doers. We call them go getters. They like to call themselves like drivers, right? They willing to take the shot. They willing to pop, 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 I don't care, right? And so one of the things of that person is, okay, if you're just doing a lot of shooting, but you ain't doing a lot of target hitting, now that may be in itself presenting the lesson that needs to be learned in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so maybe now you need to focus a little bit more on preparation. Maybe you need to focus a little bit more on identifying, right, how to sharpen the skill. Then you have the other person who's in hesitation, who's afraid to pull the trigger at
Mm-hmm.
all. They're
Yep.
not even going to take the shot, right? And they say, well, I'm just trying to be smart, I'm trying to be strategic. It's like,
Right.
yeah, but now you're inhibiting yourself from even understanding the areas that you need to make adjustments on because you're unwilling to actually take the shot. So I think in itself, the action of shooting or not shooting presents or highlights the next step that we should focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the person went through the preparation, they went through the research, they went through the development, but now they're scared to pull the trigger. I think that now shows you the next step, the next brick to focus on. Like now, okay, go figure out why there's a fear of failure.
Yep.
Go
Yep.
figure out why there's an hesitation. Go figure out what's holding you back. That's the next challenge that's presenting itself. Or if there's a person that's boom, 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 go figure out why there's an inability to be patient enough to go into the lab.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure out why you just have to go, 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 but you're not willing to study. You're not willing to do the research to understand how to be more strategic or how to aim better. Like now it's presenting itself as the current challenge. And I think challenges are like checkpoints if
Mm-hmm.
we view them that way, right? If we look at challenges as being checkpoints, it's the next stage of development that we need to meet in
Yep.
order to make it past the next point. Because if we had it, we'd have it,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think it's something to be said for not having it, which means there's something else that we need to do to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So identify what is in the way of us obtaining it, and that is presenting itself as the next checkpoint. That's at least what I look at.
Right.
It's like, dang, what's in the way? Like, okay, this is burdening me. This is holding me back. I have to attack that. I have to. And if I'm unwilling to attack it for whatever reason in my mind is telling me I don't want to do it, I have to now accept the fact that it's going to hold me back from getting where I want to get to. That play,
Yeah.
that blank. I can avoid
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And to that, when you were mentioning fire, it's this person we know that's
Mhm.
not afraid to fire.
Right.
It's ready, fire, aim.
Mhm.
And I think maybe where
Yeah.
they lack is the aiming part.
Aim. Yeah.
They're just like bang, 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 bang. Okay, great, but
Right.
you're not looking where you hit.
Right.
Right. There's always that guy when you were younger, you went out, the guy didn't care. He'll talk to any girl
Oh, he
anytime.
didn't care.
But still, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, wasn't having good relationships in his life. It was like you're just blindly firing,
Right.
but then you're not calibrating back in and seeing where you were off target
Mm-hmm.
to be able to bring it back home,
Right.
to be able to say, okay, this is what I want. Now you can recalibrate.
Yeah.
So it's all three of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got the guy that's over preparing and not talking to any girl when they go out, right? So now
Yeah.
he's over
In his
preparing
head.
from what he thinks he needs to do versus like, no, just go talk. You know, like you're overthinking it. Like, and then there's the other guy
Mm-hmm.
that's just fire, 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 but then not aiming and recalibrating what it is that he's saying.
Right.
So, you know, it's within that same model. Within that same model of, hey, when are you over preparing for the situation? Um, are you afraid to pull the trigger? Are you just blindly pulling the trigger and then not taking the reflection
Yeah.
into it of being able to go and say, you know, how off target am I based on what I want in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there's something you want in a situation, you got to say, well, what's the target? What's the target for you? If a young man is looking for a relationship, that's his target. If a young man is just looking for some fun, that's a target. So there's different targets.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to say to yourself, well, if you're just blindly firing and you're completely off that target, well, it's because the target that you're aiming for, if you're aiming for a relationship, right, but you're firing certain behaviors that are way off, not even remotely in the same stratosphere of being able to hit that target, well, it doesn't matter how much you fire, you're never going to hit that target ever. And that's when the aim comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the aim comes into play. So it's, you know, how do you identify? And a lot of men, what we need is we need people that are you know, more that are better shooters, that are more honed in on
Yeah.
their own capability, that can identify with us and be like, hey, just fire the gun. Just fire the gun. You know what? You have enough. Fire the gun.
Right.
Fire the gun. I should fire the gun. Fire the gun.
Just go.
Is it? Fire the gun.
Just go.
Just fire the gun. Now let's go and be like, all right, look where it hit. What do you think? Well, it looks like I'm pulling a little. Fantastic. What do you think you need to do to adjust that so that it heads more to the side? Well, maybe I could do this. What do you could do that? No problem. That's
Right.
leadership. And that's what young men are lacking these days, to be able to have someone to come in rather than just look at them and say, you're not doing this, you're not
Right.
doing that. No, it has to be a mold of both.
Yeah.
It has to be hard love. It has to be tough love.
Yep.
It has to be, hey,
Yep.
pick up the gun.
Yep.
Because that's how men are forged through challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Men are forged through challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's, you know, if you're challenging a man, like, listen, you know what? Are you going to hit the target? Great. Okay. Hit it.
Right.
Right. Men are forged through challenge.
Yeah.
And they need that push, that push, that push. And all of a sudden they get to see what their true capabilities are.
Big time.
But it's only when you have someone, and if you have that mentor in your life, you have that father figure in your life that can say to you, trust me, shoot the gun.
Mm-hmm.
You have enough. The prepared are the 5 lessons of gun ownership, etc. Right? Or just hand a firearm to a child and say fire.
Yeah.
But therein lies the metaphor.
Right.
That's the ready. Ready to a point.
Mm-hmm.
Ready teaching the laws of firearm
Right.
safety. Now fire the gun.
Big
But
time.
if you spend years understanding the hammer spring mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
the magazine and the release button, and you can take a gun apart and you can put it back together and you can everything that you need to know about a firearm, but you've never shot one before,
Mm-hmm.
how's your accuracy going to be? Terrible.
Big time.
Terrible. Your accuracy will be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't take away from learning about how to handle a gun,
Mm-hmm.
learning about handgun safety,
Right.
and then at the same time firing the gun, and then being able to look at where you are from someone that's already calibrated in about how they can fire a gun, and realize that even on top of that, and one thing is when you do learn, you know, when you're firing rifles,
Mm-hmm.
right, it's because of our dimensions and we have different dominant eyes,
Right.
right? Our eyesight, that can all affect the way a gun is fired,
Big time.
right? So all of that has to be taken into consideration, that it's not as simple as, hey, you know what, you take this and fire it exactly this way and it's going to happen.
Right.
There's small idiosyncrasies that everyone has. So how do you find someone that has shot a gun long enough, right? Is a marksman to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent, and to be able to learn from them. But you got to be able to fire the gun, look at what you hit, and then be able to calibrate with the help of a marksman. And
Mm-hmm.
the exact same metaphor can be used through life.
Yeah.
Learn enough so you know how to drive, get in the damn car, drive the car, analyze if you've gotten into any fender benders, any scratches,
Yep.
understand people are going to hit you at different times. And at the same time, what do you need to do to be a better driver? Say, hey, you know what? When I was here, when I pulled out, and something almost happened, I didn't look to this spot.
Right.
I didn't check my blind spot. Got it. Okay, now I'm
Yeah.
recalibrating to make myself a better driver. And there's a lot of people out there that don't do that. And they
Mm-hmm.
just want to blame all the other drivers on the road. And we all need to look in the mirror and say, all right, are the accidents I've been in,
Mm-hmm.
right? The collisions I've been in. I don't even use the word accidents when it comes to cars. This is collisions.
Mm-hmm.
When you're saying accident, for the vast majority of car collisions, someone or something is at fault, right? The word accident doesn't make any sense in that context.
Yeah.
Like, what's such an accident about it? This person was speeding. This person rear-ended this person. This person crossed the light. Or it could just be that neither did anything wrong. They were both going and didn't see one another and collided, right? So, in thinking about that and knowing that life is going to be full of collisions, the same way driving could potentially have collisions. There's no oh, it was an accident. It was an accident. No, there was some kind of a mishap along the way, and there has to be some degree of fault. There has to be, right? There in any car accident, there has to be one degree of fault, even if it's 1 degree
Mm-hmm.
of fault to someone or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that fault could even be a pothole, right? That collision occurred because this pothole made someone blow out their tire, which then caused the car to get out of control. That's what happened.
Yeah.
It was not an accident, it was a collision caused by a pothole. That's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no accidents when it comes to driving. So if you view your life the same way and say, let me identify the collisions I've been in, and if you keep being in the same collisions
Mm-hmm.
over and over, then it's extremely important to be able to look and be like, all right, is it my driving?
Hell yeah.
You know,
Is it my
is it
driving?
my driving?
For
And
sure.
we've all been there, and I think a lot of times it absolutely has been.